Okay, this is the first tutorial for 242, 342, and 442 actually. For the symbol mark for 242, the word mark or letter mark, word mark for 342, and letter mark for 442. So what I'm going to do is open up some logos here into Illustrator, and I'm just going to quickly go through a bunch of these and how you might want to start designing these. I'm going to bring up my page size here and grab and drag and drop these logos in here, and they're all different sizes. Let's start with the simple one. Let's start with this little pick it up thing. To make this mark, how I might make this mark is I might actually first build it vertically like this, like a cross, and take your sort of rectangle and give it as a fill but no stroke. And then I'm going to take this and use my little rotate tool and leave the axis, hold down Option and Shift, and that'll make that shape perfectly like that. And then I'm going to find this square. You could just draw the square there. Before I move on any farther, I sort of want to align all this stuff to make sure it's aligned perfectly. So go to Window Align, make sure it's showing. I'm going to grab all of this, and on my line here, I'm going to go to Align Vertically, Align Horizontally. Okay, so now I've got this piece. I've got all these extra pieces in the back here, the little squares. To create those, I might just come in here and do something like this, grab that square, and again I can rotate this one, and holding Option will duplicate it, holding Shift will rotate it in perfectly 90-degree angles. And I'm going to move this down here, and again I'm going to select everything and align it. Then what I could do, I could grab all of this, make a duplicate, and then on one of these, the duplicate, I'm going to break everything apart. So I'm going to use this divide, and I'm going to go up to Ungroup, or Shift Command G. And what this does now is that I have these individual squares separate here. So I could select these, and those are all now separate. So if I wanted to get rid of those, move these over. I think I'll actually group these again, and then I'll align everything again. And there you go. Instead of grouping and ungrouping, you can also double click any group structure, and you'll notice up here at the top left hand side it shows that I'm inside of this group. So now they're actually individually selectable. So I could select this one, make it blue, use the eyedropper tool. One thing that I would use if it's handy, next to each of these tools there's a little letter at the end. The eyedropper says I. That is a little keystroke that you can hit I at any time, and it'll give you that tool. V is to select, I is to eyedrop, so you can eyedrop any of these. Right? And so on. So you'd go ahead and select all that. And when you're out of it, again, it regroups it, and you can go ahead and finish that. I'm not going to do anything more to that logo. I'm going to move on here to something else. Let's move on to the good old-fashioned Nike swoosh. To create this logo, I would probably use the pen tool. You could try to trace this in Illustrator and then fine-tune it. In fact, maybe we'll do that really quickly. You could go up to Object, tracing options. To trace it, you go to Object, Tracing Options, and first set the options. Go to Preview. That's a pretty clean trace, actually. You go to Trace It, and Object, Live Trace, Release, and or Make and Expand. That's what we want. And then you're going to ungroup this again. Object, Ungroup. Use shortcuts if you know how. And there's actually a pretty good swoosh. You could refine it. If you didn't want to do it that way, you could use your anchor pen tool. I'm not that convinced with the pen tool, but you can use it in a way that sometimes works here. And if you're careful, you can create your own little swoosh. Now you need to make sure that these endpoints are you end on the same point. If you haven't done that, if you failed to do that, then you can use your little white arrow and actually select both of those points and join them together. You're sort of welding them together. So you're going to go to Object, Path, Join, or Command J. Then that'll make that one big thing. And you can come in here and fine tune this. Right? And so on. Next logo. Let's do this one. This one, I would probably build it with, circles like this. And then with this one, I would use the rotate tool to get a perfect rotation, but I would find the center and then rotate this one perfectly, holding Option. Shift is not going to, it's going to snap it in the wrong way, so you're going to have to hold Option there. And then you can go to Object, Transform, Transform again, and that will repeat it. Apple D or Command D. And then we'll grab one for the center here. So we've got our basic structure here. Now we need to introduce these little blobs. A simple way might just be to draw a rectangle. And split the difference here. And then what else I'm going to take that same black circle, make it white, bring it to the front, and then actually find that curve. You can probably see where that might sit. Okay, it's not exact. But you could then go in here and using your Pathfinder, you could join these guys, these two together. I'm going to join those and hit Expand. And then these that are on top, I'm going to subtract from shape area, or subtract the top one from the bottom one. Always make sure you hit Expand. And same thing there. Then you could go in here and modify or even redraw that curve. I'm sort of slaughtering it here, but you get the idea. Okay. Moving on. I'm going to grab this little duck here. This is similar to the last problem where you're going to make these basic forms, these basic shapes, and then you're going to use these other shapes to subtract from them. I'm not exact, but you get the idea. And then for this shape, I'm going to use a big circle, but I'm going to modify it. You could just come in here and grab these vectors. You can see it has sort of a nice egg shape there. I'm going to make it an outline just so I can see what's going on, because I'm going to create this other shape in here. And so on. So this one will swap the colors again over here, swap the fill and the stroke, and I'll subtract this one from that one. Oops. Wrong one. This one needs to be on top, so I'm going to bring to front, try that again. And there's my shape. One trick you may want to try with this is actually go to Filter, Stylize Round Corners. This will round any of the corners so that you can try to get this sort of thing happening. So let's try rounding the corners again. Try 0.5. So that actually produces a nice round corner that I can then go back in here and fine-tune that edge a little bit better, right? The CBS logo, this is pretty straightforward. This is more Pathfinder work. You're going to make, your basic shapes here. I would make one the size of the inner eye, and then the size of the other eye. I'm using Shift Option to scale it from the middle. If you just use Shift or just scale it, it'll just scale it like that. Shift obviously keeps it proportional, and Option will scale it from the middle. So there's my two circles. Select both of them, align them vertically and horizontally so they're perfect. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to find this curve, which actually Paul Rand's a smart guy, and he's using the same curve from the bigger circle anyway. So let's move it in place and then move that, make another copy, and then move that horizontally. Again, I'm holding Shift so it doesn't move its horizontal position. And now all I need to do is align these vertically. Now I can select all this stuff. I could try to figure out what to do with what's overlapping what, but instead I'm going to make it simple, divide everything, ungroup it, and just delete all that other information. And then once you've got the rest of the information you want, you've still got these gaps. You're just going to add everything together, hit expand, and now it's all one big shape. One nice big clean shape. It's the CBS logo. The last one you may want to try is the Intel logo. The Adidas, we've got a couple more. Intel logo, this is a typographic solution that you can figure out. What I'm interested in doing is this little swoosh. A cool trick to do that is to take your little circle here, or make an oval, and let's make it a stroke. Let's try to get it on here. I'll use my white arrows to make it exact as possible. nudge it in place. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go over here to my eraser tool and go to my scissors. You see the keystroke, which is C, scissors. I'm going to make a cut right here, right there on the logo. And now, since you've made a cut, it's actually cut a piece in there, so you can move each of these parts. So I can move that back up and move these pieces so they work. So I have an oval that's been cut like that. So hopefully you can see that oval. So I have a sort of general shape like this. I could try to simplify it or smooth it out if I wanted to. Something like that. Right, you can see what that object path simplify does. Now the next step is to try to get this thin to thick ratio. An easy way to do that, it's not totally easy, would be to create a brush, create your own brush. So what I would do to do that is set up a rectangle. And what I want to do is create a brush that has the same thick to thin ratio, but I'm going to make it in a straight line. So what I might suggest you do is use your rectangle and then use an ellipse and get that thick to thin ratio happening. And use your good old Pathfinder to erase these. And it looks like on one end it's a little smaller over here, thinner than that. So on one end of this, I'm going to use my white arrow and select just the edge. And now select back over here on my free transform tool. And now it will transform just that edge, just that piece over there. I'm having a problem with that extra anchor point. So I'm going to delete, make sure I delete that extra anchor point. So that should be a little bit better. It's not perfect. By any means, but that's good. Now the cool thing about Illustrator is that I can make any vector into a brush. So let's go to Window, Brushes. Here we go. Where's my brushes? All right, all you need to do, take this symbol, click and drag it all the way over to your brushes. New pattern brush. Hit OK. We're going to leave these for now. We want to make this method tints, so that way we can actually colorize it later. So make sure that's tints, the method is tints, and hit OK. Now you'll see that I've got my brush over here. So I can select my shape that has a stroke. Now that's important, it needs to have a stroke. And I'm going to select that brush. And voila, there you go. I've got thick, thin, back to a little bit thicker. I could modify this a little bit if I wanted to in the middle, so it's even more dynamic, thick to thin, which could be cool. So I'm going to click this, drag it back over to my brushes, make a new pattern brush, and make sure that's tints, and give this stroke a new updated one. Looks like the old one must work better. You can select either. You can actually select that color. Whoops. Give it a color here. And the last but not least, if you want to change the stroke to a fill, then you're going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. It won't work to go to Outline Stroke. If you go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, it'll just outline the stroke. But if you want to expand what's existing there, you go to Object, Expand Appearance. And there you go. And now you've got regular vector. And the Adidas, the one is pretty simple. All I would do for this is the rectangles. You know, move them down like this using Option, and then like that. The cool thing about this is that you could potentially, you could grab the white arrow, grab the bottoms of all of these, and then you can actually use your Align tool and align the bottoms. Very cool, right? So you're just moving the bottom pieces. And then you can align these so that they are in the same whatever. I'm not going to make sure this is perfect. And then use your rectangle tool and select all these and chop the tops off. You'll have to do this 3 different times with 3 different shapes. So there's 1, I've created duplicates, there's 2, and there's 3. And there's your little Adidas. Okay, another way to do this would be to take a rectangle. Same thing, I'm just going to split the difference between the two. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to join all of these together using my Pathfinder, hit expand, and I'm going to go up here to filter, stylize round corners. Filter, stylize round corners, and you'll need to find a tolerance that works right. I'm going to try 0.2, and this will then round all the corners, inside and outside corners. When you do that, there you go. You've got a nice rounded cornered piece.